Hello everyone, and welcome to the Biblical Bookworm. My name is Elizabeth, and today I'll be talking about the book Pray, Decide, and Don't Worry by three great Catholic speakers, namely Jackie and Bobby Angel and Father Mike Schmitz. I have linked their channel in the description in case that you've never heard of them. And in their book, they give you 5 steps in 5 chapters to how to discern God's will for your life. That can be your vocation, that can also be whether you have to accept a certain job offer or what you should choose to study in college. Now let's start with the first chapter. It's called Seek. And in every chapter, the authors give you some ideas for meditation that might be helpful at this step of your discernment. And in this specific chapter, we are advised to meditate on what we are passionate about and also what makes us leave bed in the morning, so that we might discern what we would like to do in the future, what we would like to do with our lives. But at the same time, Father Mike warns us that just because we want something doesn't mean that we are actually called to do it. For example, he says that when he was a kid or a teenager, he wanted to become Batman or be Baywatch. And so he worked really hard. He started paying attention to his physical health in order to achieve that goal. But as time went on, he, of course, realized that he was not Batman. He was not called to be Batman, and he became a priest. I also would like to share a story that I have witnessed. I know that many people ask themselves whether you can be called to a religious life, even though you want to have children. And I once had the honor to eat dinner with religious sisters, and I asked them this exact question: did you want to have children? Because they were obviously already in religious life. And the fascinating answer was that every single one of those religious sisters actually wanted to be a mother. They actually, every single one of them wanted to have children. So that shows us that just because you want something, as Father Mike said in the book, doesn't mean that you're called to do it. Chapter 2 is called Search and Discern. And here the authors talk about the 4 necessary steps or the 4 criteria, how we can discern whether we should choose an option or whether we should avoid it. And the first step here is we have to think about whether that's actually a good option. So for example, if someone desires to sin and discerns whether they should sin or not, that's obvious. That's a bad decision. That would be a bad option. So that shouldn't be discerned any further. The second step would be to think about whether that's actually an open option. So for example, a married woman doesn't have the need or even the option to discern whether she's called to a religious life. And the third step is to think about whether that's a wise door. So for example, if you know your weaknesses and you know that that option would probably not be a good idea because of the weaknesses you have, you shouldn't choose that. And the fourth step is finally to think about whether you actually want that option, whether you would choose that option freely. And another story that Father Mike shares at this point is that he said that he was praying for his vocation, to find out what his vocation is, for 10 years. And during those 10 years, he didn't get any answer. So he wanted to Father Mike wanted to give us some hope that just because it takes a while doesn't mean that we won't get an answer in the end. But he realized that during those 10 years, even though he didn't receive any answer to the specific question that he had, he only asked that one question: what am I supposed to do with my life? God actually prepared him to become a priest, and God actually used that time very fruitfully. The third chapter is actually my favorite chapter. It's called Silence. And here the authors talk a bit about the feeling of silence, or also the feeling of loneliness that we experience while we are waiting for an answer to a discernment or while we are discerning something. And I think it was Jackie Angel who said that the grass always appears greener on the other side, right? Single people always think that people in relationships, people who are married, are happier. But in fact, the grass is greener where you water it. And I really like that comparison, so that Jackie explained that miserable single people will probably be also miserable married people. And so if you have some problems, if you feel like you are living an unfulfilled life and we are unsatisfied with something in our lives, we should conquer that problem, we should solve that problem before we bring that problem into marriage, where it might actually become even bigger. And what I also liked in that chapter was the meaning of loneliness, that loneliness might be actually God knocking at the door of your heart, asking you to spend time with him. I found that so beautiful. I don't know, that's probably my favorite sentence from the whole book. And also another thing that I liked in that chapter is where they explained a possible meaning of silence. And silence could mean that God is just satisfied with the state you're being in right now. And if he wants you to move, if he wants you to change something, he will let you know. The fourth chapter is called Swords, and here the authors remind us that a goal without us taking action remains just a dream. So if we fantasize about maybe this vocation or this decision might be the right thing, we should actually try it out. Of course, you can't try out marriage, but most things you can try out in advance. And so that's the calling here. And I would like also to recommend a video to you that I think is really helpful on that topic. I will link that in the description down below. The final chapter, the fifth chapter, is called Step Out. And here the authors advise us to just make a decision and don't worry about it. If we have discerned it so far, it should be a good decision by now. And also they shared some stories in order to show us that just because the decision-making process takes a bit longer doesn't mean that that's wasted time. For example, Jackie said that she didn't want to have kids, even though she was discerning the vocation of marriage, until she met her husband, Bobby. And Father Mike said that if he had felt the call to the priesthood even a little bit earlier than he actually did, he wouldn't have been ready. He didn't explain what that exactly meant for him, but he said that the call from God came at the exact perfect time. Now let's get to my opinion on the book. I think that the value of the book actually lies in the fact that 3 well-known speakers share their experiences in the book, because that way it becomes way more relatable. And we also have some examples of how the discernment process can go, how long it can take, what feelings the authors had during that time. And also chapter 3, I think, is a beautiful chapter in order to see that if God is just being silent and he doesn't answer your prayers for a specific decision, that can also mean that he's just satisfied with the state you're being in right now. And I found that really beautiful. I would give the book probably 9 out of 10 stars because it was an easy read, and it also delivered on its promise to help you discern the questions that were supposed to lead you to reflection on yourself. I think might be really helpful. For example, for the spiritual exercises, I've made a video about that a couple of months ago. I will link it over here. And I hope you liked the video. So see you next week. God bless and bye.